Just think about how impractical that would have been, especially before the days that we had the internet. It would take all the time. And so the reason why you put representatives is it just makes things actually practical.
But yeah, also I was gonna say that on top of like doing like having that type of democracy because the people is too large, it's also because like the topics are too disagreeable and too what's the word I'm looking for?
I mean, one thing is it's
controversial.
Yeah, so issues can be controversial and also they're just complicated.
Yeah, all complicated.
Think about like all the different things that get voted on in the United States.
Yeah, we could vote about like is 100 more than 50, like everybody would be able to vote on that.
Yeah.
I mean, unless you don't really know math.
But yeah, like,
you know.
like we've said in this class, like so many things. Think about things like imagine New York City decides we need to find a way of improving the subway system. Everyone agrees about that. Like everyone's on board that lives in New York City that thinks we need to improve it. Now I want you all to tell me how to improve it. How many of you feel qualified to make an informed, smart decision of what the best way to fix the subway is? We simply aren't qualified to do that. And so one of the other reasons that you want representatives is if somebody's only job is to be a politician, they can put more time and effort into becoming masters of topics than you can if you also have a day job. So that's the whole, another thing that's good about representative over direct is that things get more and more and more complicated. Direct just becomes impractical because you have a lot of people who are unqualified making decisions. So this is what we have in the United States. And ideally, it would work very, very well and everyone would get a say. But democracy has some problems. Some of them we talked about. So we said autocracy is good for what reason? It's quick. And so what's the downside with democracy? It's slow. It takes a really long time for things to change in a democracy. And when things get to the point that the two sides can't agree with each other, what ends up happening very often, because the people are deciding, either nothing changes or, pardon?
Or very little changes.
Very little changes. Like unless you get an overwhelming majority, it can be very hard to get things to change in a democracy. And if you can't get things to change because it doesn't change and one side gets mad enough, you end up with a civil war pretty quickly. Which is, what we had in this country due to slavery. So the issue is if you have an issue that nobody can decide upon and it's a democratic system that doesn't make things change, people just get really, really frustrated and there's no one person to take it out on. Like, if a king is the one thing about autocracy too, is if the king or dictator becomes problematic, it's just one person. Then you end up with lots of political assassinations. But in a democracy, it's very hard because it's everybody having a say, and it can just grind to a halt. And even if it's not grinding to a halt, if things have to be decided on quickly, democracies don't work great, which is tied into something we've been talking about all semester, technology and laws around that. What are some other issues with democracy, or ways in which it doesn't always work perfectly, especially this one? What are some issues with representative democracies?
There might be like very different opinions and like there might be like biases.
So yeah, so here's another issue, is just because the people are making the decisions doesn't mean that the people are always the most informed. And just because things get more and more complicated, there's never even a guarantee that the representatives are fully informed. So even if in some ways there's benefits to having more informed people, as things get more and more complicated, and technology, like in the case of technology, it becomes faster and faster, and you have to be younger and younger to understand it. Like if I were to put together a special team on understanding the problems of Instagram, the average age of my team for developing Instagram laws would be like 14. And the issue is, if you are 14, you are not qualified to be elected into the United States government. Like that's just a fact of the matter. And yet those are the people who understand the tech the best. So that's another issue, is that who the representatives are, there's going to be biases, because to become a representative, you have to be a special sort of person. You have to want to be in the public eye, and you have to want to have that sort of power. Like the worst thing in the world to me is being famous. That sounds horrible. Like, the thought of being famous sounds awful. Like, think about that. You go out to lunch and everybody knows who you are. That sounds awful, exhausting. Everything you do, there's going to be someone following you. That has to sound good to you if you want to run for president or senator or anything like that. Like, that sounds horrendous to me. I would never be in any way interested. So there's a self-selection bias of, like, who gets to be a representative. You have to be the sort of person who would want to run for that, which also has some biases built in. What are some other issues?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was about to say that, like, who's qualified to be a representative, like, you know, and then on top of that, like, I remember there was a time when they were trying to make it so that people, well, historically, like, they were trying to decide who was qualified to say who could be a representative, like, they didn't even want to give you the right to even choose the representative.
Yeah, so that's actually, this is the United States today, but the actual US government with the Electoral College originally had a third layer where you would vote for somebody who would vote for somebody who would choose on the issue. So there were like 3 levels. And the reason why was because there were some logistical reasons having to do with the fact that horses are slow and not everyone could get to the polling places. And also there was another issue of they didn't even think people were qualified enough to know enough about the candidates. So it was like 3 layers away. Another issue, though, is tied in with this. Oh, we're supposed to stop. I'm taking 2 more minutes. Another issue is tied in with how do you choose the representatives? Who's making the decisions? Who chooses who your representatives are? The people. But people, like everything, aren't perfect. And how the people make the decision is not a perfect system, and there are better and worse ways of having the people decide, and there are better and worse ways of having this happen, and there are ways in which right here is another area in which the technology steps in, and that's what I want to talk about next time. It's just like, if this is how we're doing it, and this is why we like democracies, because we don't end up with one crazy person in charge, and also everyone gets some say. That's the other major thing about a democracy, is everyone has some decision. And so what the question is going to be is, in what ways has technology, this is your question to think about for 5 minutes before next class, is in what ways has technology helped democracy, made it more so that everyone has a say? Don't answer now, answer next week.
Sorry.
It's okay. Like, in what ways does it make it much more positive and easier? And in what ways has it made it worse and harder? And that's what we're going to talk about next time. All right, get going, and I will see you all next Friday, and enjoy your week. And I'm not turning that on.